Welcome to another episode of What the Tech Am I Doing? Today we have Joe Nuzzolese, who's our Corporate Vice President at Edwards Lifesciences, leading the global supply chain and now quality as well. So increasing the scope there. But just to get started, we're going to jump right in.
Sure.
So how did you get to this point? What makes Joe Joe? What are the things that people don't know about you in your life, you know?
Wow. So that's a heavy
Starting with the easy one.
That's a heavy duty question to start with. So let's see. So my vision of myself when I was in high school was to be an engineer.
Oh, really?
And I was really super excited about following a career in engineering. And so I went to school undergraduate for to be an electrical engineer, because my view was I wanted to be work on avionics, essentially.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so actually one of my first jobs was working in avionics.
Okay, so you had it. Yeah.
No, I actually worked in avionics, and I worked on radar systems for a company. One of the things that I learned, while I was in that job was, there was a lot of interesting things going on back in that time, including job cuts, defense spending cuts.
Yeah.
And, when I was in college, I also co-opted, because I started my career also as an intern working for Johnson & Johnson. And so I had interned there. And so what I decided was that I'm going to move over and try the healthcare field. Okay. And that's how I started my career in J&J. And so from there, essentially what I did was for the first, 7 years of my career, I worked in many, many different engineering disciplines. As a matter of fact, I always laugh about this. My first job was actually as a facilities engineer.
No way.
Yeah, so I was like 22 years old. I started in this job, and I had responsibility for essentially, 50 craftspeople, electricians and pipe fitters, and all that sort of thing. And I was like, I'm an electrical engineer. I don't really know much about this, but I'll give it a go. And I learned a really important lesson in that job, though, because you always go into these jobs with the idea that, hey, listen, I'm educated. I went to school. I'm going to tell people what to do because I know better. And the truth is, that's not the truth at all. You can learn as much, and you have to really be open-minded, about what you learn. So I learned a ton in that job, and then I moved to a bunch of other engineering disciplines, including process engineering, equipment, so on and so forth. So I did that for many years, in my career, the first 7 really. And then I decided to move over to manufacturing. And so I moved over to manufacturing, and that was really my first role in operations. Mm-hmm. And I worked as a manufacturing supervisor, and then became a business unit manager, so on and so forth. And so my career really took off, if you will, on the operational side of the business. And, the rest is history. So I had lots of different opportunities, if you will, for growth and for different challenges. And what I learned, I think through that, Dolly, was really where I had a passion. Yeah. And so I had a passion for engineering. Okay. As a matter of fact, if you talk to people today in my organization, they'll always ask me, you ask me a lot of detailed questions about engineering. And I'm like, yeah, I do. But not because I'm questioning you, because I'm curious. Just that's like, the way I kind of grew up.
Of me likes
that. Exactly. And so but on the other side, I also learned that I loved working with people. And so that's what the operations side gave me. Yeah. So anyway, that's how I went up through the ranks. Yeah.
So a couple questions from that. So first, a comment. Couldn't agree more with what you were saying about the facilities, and when you were there, realizing how much just learning from others. For some of the projects I've been working on, I think like the first 3 months I joined, we had success on the project, and everyone was like, oh, you did well. How? And I'm like, I listened to the operators and the manufacturing engineers. I really cannot take credit for this one. And same thing with internships. It was like, oh, how'd you come up with this? I was like, some operator had an idea, and they told me, and I told you. And so you'd be surprised when you listen to the people that were, quote unquote, supposed to be leading, or, oh, we have this degree, we're supposed to have this knowledge. You're like, there's so many people around you if you just listen to and I think there's the importance of treating everyone equally.
Exactly.
It's like,
this is, I hope this doesn't sound funny. One of the things that I learned was some of the best engineers that I worked with were actually folks that were mechanics.
They had the trade knowledge.
That worked for 20, 30 years in their trade.
Yeah.
They knew the processes inside out.
So true.
They could tell us things we could never even imagine. And obviously there's a discipline that as an engineer you apply, right?
Yeah.
To all of that. But I'm telling you, some of these folks were so skilled that if you don't listen to them, you know, you're really missing something.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I would say.
That's
And that
what-
was really a key lesson for me.
For sure. I think it's key for success. If not, you're missing this huge gap of
Exactly.
knowledge.
Exactly.
And then another question I had, you had mentioned, you know, kind of started going. Is there a point in your career where you're like, oh, I think I kind of want to be up doing some big cross-functional leadership?
Yeah.
Did you enter at that stage that you knew you wanted to go to leadership track? Or somewhere along the way, did you realize the people portion?
No, so actually, I never even imagined being in the job that I was because, you know, kind of as I mentioned, when I started my career, I really started as an engineer. I wanted to be an engineer.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of what I saw my career track being. So then I got an opportunity to move over to manufacturing, and I really enjoyed it. And so I remember this vividly. I said to myself, at that point in time, I was like, I wonder if I'm ever gonna get promoted to a manager.
Ever.
Ever. It's like, I hope I'm on the
one
short
day.
list of succession planning. You know, I'm not really sure. So anyway, obviously I got that opportunity. But, you know, I think to answer your question is that what I found is different opportunities came my way. Some because of what I gave, right? You know, obviously I had a certain skill.
Yeah.
You know, I did well in the jobs that I had. And leaders recognized that, and they gave me opportunities for growth. They were always my choice, but every one of those was a stepping stone. But the one thing that I could tell you, and I coach people on this all the time today, is you cannot necessarily chart every career step that you're going to take.
Yeah.
Because you're going to learn things in one assignment, you're going to get opportunities.
Yeah.
And I could tell you, I've probably been in, 25 different jobs in my career. Of those, probably half of those were jobs that didn't exist when I started. Because, you know, again, things change over time, opportunities come up, you learn different things. And I think that's really the opportunity. So I think when people try to overplan their career, they really shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
You know, it's good to think about what you aspire to. So was there a point in time when I said, look, this is my career track? If there is, I don't know when it was, because kind of the jobs that I had and the experiences that I had just led me down a certain track. And I always felt that I never shot for a particular job or a particular promotion. You know, that wasn't really kind of my goal. And I remember, by the way, I'll tell you a quick story. I had a guy that coached me, you know, for many years. And he told me an interesting story. He said, you know, when leaders look across the field, right, they see thousands of heads. You want to be one of those people that stands up above the rest. And if you do that, you're going to get recognized and you're going to get opportunities.
That's fair.
And so how do you differentiate yourself? You know, what are the things you do? What are the responsibilities? So my view always was, I'm going to measure my success by the impact I can have on the business. You know, what are the types of things that I'm doing versus what's the level of the job?
Yes. Yeah.
You know, and for me, that was kind of an important mantra that I always lived by. And I wish I could say I knew that when I was 20 years old. I didn't, because, you know, when you're young in your career, you always focus on what's the next step? How do I get ahead? You know, those types of things. But it's something you learn over your career.
I think that's good advice, because I think a lot of people, and maybe it's just my age in the career, but I've seen with COVID, you know, everyone stopped for a little bit and they had all this time to think about their lives.
Right.
And then maybe you're on social media more, so you see what everyone else is doing. And I've seen a lot more questions come up from a lot of the listeners too about stressing out. This person's doing this. These people are moving. I should be doing this. And I think, have you heard of the I think it's Ikigai model?
No.
I don't know if I'm saying it right. I could be saying it completely wrong. But it's basically like a Venn diagram. It's like what the world needs, what you're good at, what you're passionate about, and what you can get paid for. Yeah. And if those all align, I'm sure there's many other models, but it's like if those all align, you're going to be happier and you're going to feel more fulfilled in the work you're doing. Yeah. And so I like what you're saying, where if you are enjoying it, you can be growing with it. Obviously, you know, you want to get paid for it. Yeah. And then, you know, if a point comes along where you're no longer growing, you're no longer enjoying it, maybe you feel plateaued, start thinking about what other things you're enjoying, and you can look forward.
Absolutely.
But I think it can be almost, it's beneficial in some ways to obviously look, what am I reaching for?
Yeah.
But I think sometimes it can be a little more stressful when you're like, I need to get here, and to get here, I need to move every bit, and it's.
But that's 100% right. I don't know about the icky principle or whatever it may be. I'm not super familiar with it, but I'll give you Joe's principle.
Yeah.
Right? Kind of Joe's principle is you have to have an aspiration for yourself. And that aspiration can change over time. Yeah. And it does. Kind of as you mature in your career, you're going to learn things and you're going to have different aspirations. And you never have to completely commit to it, but you need to know a general direction, right, that you're interested in. And I agree with the concept of, look, if you're challenged and you enjoy what you're doing, then you'll be fulfilled. Yes. What I would add to that is if also you're moving towards your aspirations, that's a good one, and you're learning, and you're feeling fulfilled. And for me personally, it's my sphere of influence is increasing. In other words, the impact I'm having is increasing. That's super important to me. Now, one of the things that I would say, and this is different obviously for many people, is I've been blessed, other than working on radar systems right early in my career, I've been blessed with working in the medical field my entire career. And so the reason I say I'm blessed by that is, what greater calling can you have than work on things that help people, right? And I always saw that as, really fulfilling for me personally. And so that's the other thing is, is what you're doing, what's the purpose of what you're doing? Yeah. And in the end, what's your life purpose? And I always say to people, in fact, I just said this in a meeting earlier today, because I really believe this, is when you're fully mature, you're grown up, you're ready to retire, let's say. Yeah. And you look back, what's the legacy you want to leave behind? And I think if you look back and say, I'm proud of what I've done, you're fulfilled. Yeah. That's a good point. If you look back, and you say, not so much, then I'm not so sure that you're fulfilled, right? But I don't think it's ever too late to make that decision. That's the point, that I would make. And it's okay to learn and change as you go. Yeah. We say recently, we always say life is short. I'm like, life is long. Life is the longest thing we do. Well, a lot of things happen really quick. That's fair. That's for sure. But you obviously don't want to wait. So like in the moment, you don't want to say, oh, well, life's long. I'm going to, it may be in 10 years. But you can change something now. If you're at a certain age or period in your life where you're like, I'm not happy, but, I'm not going to change my career. I'm not going to change this. It's like, you might have a long way to go, and best times to do it now. Absolutely. And that's why, you never have an opportunity. You always have an opportunity to change your game plan. Yeah. Is kind of what I call it. And by the way, kind of in that, your life circumstances change as well. True. Right? And I think as you progress in your career, you might find you like to do different things, or your family situation might change, or, your economic situation. There's so many factors that go into that. Yeah. But I still believe in the principle of, you keep focused on what you're doing. And look, I think when you're young in your career, I remember this for myself, right? So I'll use my own example. When you're early in your career, I'm going to call it the first 10 years. Generally, right? Yeah. What most people are interested in is understanding, how do they progress their career? How do I get to the next level? How do I make more money? How do I get promoted, right, to the next level? And I think that's all legitimate. I did the same thing, right? That was a goal. Then you enter kind of a second phase of your career, which is, does the work that I do, is it meaningful, and am I having a bigger impact, right? Yeah. And then for me, there's a third phase of your career, right? The third phase of your career is, am I excited about what I do, and is it meaningful? Okay. And that's kind of independent of level. It's independent. It's really meaningful what you do, who you work for, what you're accomplishing, those kinds of things. And frankly, I think everybody goes through those. There's no formula, some earlier, some later, whatever. But, and not everybody goes through the same phases, I would say. But I really do believe that, at least for me, that's been my experience, is what I've seen in others, and I've seen for myself. The other thing that I would just mention, Dolly, which I think is really important, is influencers in your life matter. Yes. And so, what I would say is, there's as I kind of look back at my career over 30 years, right now, is I could point back to probably 3 people in my career that have been friends and mentors that have made that have had a direct impact in terms of what I did, what I enjoyed, and helping me kind of recognize what I was going to accomplish. And I think it's important for people to have those.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's not something somebody could set up for you. It's not like, I'm picking Dolly and I'm picking you and, you guys are a mentor-mentee relationship, right? It kind of happens. Yes. It should almost happen organically.
Yes.
Very right? Fluidly. And that's a big difference.
For sure. I couldn't agree more, because I think there's so many where the mentors and the leaders, whether it's your direct manager or it's someone you admire, and building that, it's crazy. Especially, I feel like in a company now where culture is the big thing. Yeah. You'd be surprised how much just being nice people and finding people who you admire for certain things, and you don't have to go to them and say, hey, will you be my mentor? But you can go and be like, I admire the way you lead meetings. Exactly. Do you have advice for me? Exactly. I admire the way you deal with disagreements. I'm in a disagreement right now. I'm, negotiating something. Can you help me through it? And just through that, I feel like you start building things. Yeah. And you start learning from the people you admire most. Yeah. Most people are willing to talk and help.
And you could learn different things from different people, right? I think that's your point, and I think that's 100%. So you learn a little from a lot. Yeah. Right? And that's okay. But I still believe there's only a few people in the end, when you look back on your career, that are true mentors.
That's fair. That can go with you through it all.
At least, some period of time. Yeah. It's not going to be forever.
Phases of
I could tell you by example, right? Today, I've probably had a person who I'd say has been my mentor for the last 15, maybe 20 years.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But it's more relational than it is. I wouldn't call it a mentor-mentee relationship.
That's my friend. Or
yeah. No, that's exactly right. It's the person you call on the phone and you can, have a kind of a simple conversation. It could be about a number of issues, but you trust them.
Yes. Having someone to bounce
those ideas off of.
Critical.
Exactly.
And the right person to bounce those ideas off. You don't want the wrong person bouncing the wrong
ideas back. So. I would say that's 100% true. Yeah.
Find the right one.
Yeah.
That makes you feel good. There's a few things you touched on, which is the perfect segue. Yeah. So through the phases. Yeah. Which I'm curious, because I feel like my perception of careers, I think, has recently changed after the last beautiful promotion that you were a part of. Yeah. I think there comes
Congratulations.
a point. Thank you. There comes a point where I'm like, in the beginning, you're chasing the promotions, you're doing these things, and then you get to a certain point where now you're comfortable. Yeah. You're like, okay, well, what's next? And I think recently I've been in this perplexion of the purpose and all these things, and I think if you have a certain amount of, you can look in different areas, and so I'm curious on what your aspirations, your goals are, and have those changed throughout the years.
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, no, but my aspirations and goals have changed a lot, through the years, because, again, as your career progresses, they change over time. What I would say is, I think I mentioned this to you already, kind of early in my career, my aspiration was to be an engineer. Yeah. As a matter of fact, kind of an interesting story, for you. It was, when I was early in my career, I had worked as an engineer, as I mentioned, for a great number of years. I actually started my own company.
Did you really?
Yeah, I started my own company, which was electronics controls program, right? So I built control panels, PLCs, programmed them, that kind of thing. And I got some great jobs, by the way. And I did that while I was working. Okay. So, I had my full-time job, and I kind of did this on the side. And at one point, I had to make a decision. Do I go into it full-time? And to be honest with you, I actually resigned from my job.
No.
I did because I was going to do it full time.
Okay.
Now, the flip side of that is my boss convinced me not to resign. So I ended up not resigning and stayed, after all. But it turned out to be a pivotal moment for me because at that point I had to make a decision. Do I pursue kind of I don't call it my life dream, but my priority at that point was, hey, you know what? I'm doing what I love. I could be my own boss.
Yeah.
I'm really good at it. And it aligns with what my long-term vision was for myself. Whereas I can continue, I'm going to call it my corporate career, and kind of advancing it. And, ultimately I made the decision to continue with my corporate career, which ended up being the right decision for me. But so I would say I had one set of goals, at that point, and they switched, right? And then if I go forward a little bit, I moved into operations, I think I explained that earlier. And when I moved into operations, my goals changed. My goals at that point were no longer, am I going to be the best engineer? Am I going to go into my own business?
Yeah.
I remember this vividly. My career aspiration changed to say, what's it going to take for me to become a plant manager?
Interesting.
Yeah. So my goal at that point was, hey, I think I can do well in this job.
Yeah.
So I aspire to become a plant manager. So let me do what I need to do in order to attain that goal, right? So after I became a plant manager, of course, right, your goals change again, and your career opportunities change again. But at one point, and I just want to mention this to you because I think it's very important. I know many people kind of are faced with that. At this point in my career, I also had a family. So I had to decide what was I willing to do for my career versus my family.
Fair.
And I don't want to say how do you prioritize them, but more or less what was, am I willing to pick up and leave and relocate, or am I willing to stay in the job? So what trade-offs was I willing to make? But ultimately, I would say kind of the last stage of that was, I kind of realized that something early on, that something that I learned was that breadth of experiences mattered, right? And so my aspirations changed, I would say again. And my aspirations changed. This goes along with the point of having a bigger impact on the organization to one of how can I influence broader than I had? And then opportunities presented themselves to allow that to happen. Yeah. So that's a bit of my story. Now, I think this has to go without saying, because there's no successful career, by the way, without making some sacrifices, by the way. And I also believe that. And so the part that I didn't tell you, right, about my career is the job you want isn't always in front of you either, because sometimes you're going to get opportunities that mean you have to make a trade-off decision. So of all the jobs that I had, right, I relocated 9 times over the course of my career, right? Not only nationally, but internationally as well. And kind of the point that I make there wasn't necessarily about the relocations, but it was more about if I wanted to progress to a particular position, that position was not available for me if I stayed where I was. But it was available in another place.
Yeah.
And so, I think there's a question you have to ask yourself, which is, what are you willing to do? In order to attain that next goal or that next aspiration, and what sacrifice are you willing to make? Because what you want is not always convenient or local or where you are. And what investments are you willing to make as well? And so for someone that's on in their career, that may have a family, may have children, whatever have you, their situation is, right? Also has some tough decisions to make.
Different trade-offs.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually turned some down because of my family situation, right, as well.
Figure out what's best for your specific situation.
Exactly. But I think all of that equals itself out in the final analysis, right? and I think I think you attain. Ultimately, I think with the right work, you attain what your goals are.
Yes.
If you're really committed to them.
Yeah.
Or you have to change your situation, but you should have no regrets.
That's fair. I think if you work hard towards it and you're at least able to see the path ahead, I'd say, like to direct you, then you're off to a good start.
That's right. That's right. No, 100% right. Now, one thing I didn't mention, which I just think would be of interest, I also believe that there's something, I call them table stakes, right?
Okay, yeah.
Do you know what table stakes are? So what I mean by table stakes is for you even to be in the conversation or to pursue, right, there's a minimum requirement, right? In other words, you have to be a good performer.
Yeah.
You have to do your job well. You have to have certain leadership skills and or traits, right? If you don't have those, it's tough to progress.
Fair.
So there's a set of skills. If you want to be an engineer, you got to be a good engineer, right? So, I mean, there's a set of basic requirements that you must have. And I call those table stakes. And if you're not able, right, to demonstrate table stakes, you're also not going to get opportunities, perhaps.
Fair. Prepare yourself for the opportunities that may come, that you want.
Correct.
So you can at least be able to accept them if they do come.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's a good point.
Exactly. Yep.
So, we'll see. On the I feel like right now it's like, I think you've talked about the impact in people, and I think there's a big motivator for me. It's like the med device, like you said, it's super easy with you're helping patients. So you're like, that's all. I always wanted to be a biomedical engineer. So I'm like, as a patient, you don't get to get your luck.
Right.
You know? And some people are just dealt an unlucky hand, but we can help them.
Correct.
And then it's interesting because I feel like a lot of the leaders you'll see also are like, this, I want to help improve patients' lives, but I also want to help the people that I work with and improving that. And so, there's a lot of ways to do it, but, being a leader is an easy way to help influence and make. And that's one of the things that I didn't necessarily realize about you until more recently. And the leaders that are more closer to you, maybe, they were like, no, Joe's like the biggest people person. And, you see, obviously you only interact with people so much. But then it's like, no, if you're in a meeting, Joe will ask about how the person's doing before he asks about the bottom line or something like that. And I thought that was really cool that that's the legacy you're leaving, that obviously you're able to deliver. But the things people are saying about you, you're showing them that you care and you care about your people.
Absolutely.
And in that, I'm sure there's benefits to the bottom line, but that makes the people around you care about you more. They care about their work. They're more fulfilled. What do you think drives you in that? And loaded question, what are you doing to continue that? I don't think
it's a loaded question at all because I just want to give you, I get you. But I just want to give you a comparison. So remember I talked about the first 10 years of my career versus the second 10 years of your career, right? And then I want to get to your question, right? So the first 10 years of your career, right, when you come out of school, kind of I'm not going to say everybody, but most people, kind of what you think and you believe is that your ticket to success is execution.
Yeah, that's a big thing.
100%, right? And it's true, right? It's 100% true. So you need to prove yourself. So your focus on that point is execute no matter what, right? You want to get your deliverables. You want to be successful. You want to show that you've done a good job, so on and so forth. As you get on in your career, particularly as you go up in levels in the organization, what you learn is that you can't control everything, right? And so the way to be successful is not by being directive, right? It's by engaging people and working and being successful through others. Okay? So now, to get to your question directly, Dolly, here's kind of how I see it, is that, and I truly believe in this principle, right? My principle is that I believe that a motivated workforce moves mountains. I do. And I'm sure you probably heard me say that before. But what does that mean? It means that you have to engage people. It means you have to spend time with them. It means you have to care about them. It means my job, I see my job as motivating people, setting a vision, helping them be successful. I don't see my job as telling them what to do. And that's a big difference, right? And so where I invest, if you ask me where I invest most of my time, is on exactly that portion of my job. So, I'll spend a lot of time in town halls. I spend a lot of time talking to people. I spend a lot of time listening. I spend a lot of time removing roadblocks for people. But first and foremost is you have to be empathetic, right? And what I mean by, when I say empathetic, I mean not fake empathetic. I mean truly care. So let me just give you a quick story about fake empathy, right? So at one point in my career, I worked for a guy who'll remain nameless. But I worked for a guy, and so every one-on-one that I had with this person, he would ask me the same question. The same question was, how's your family doing? Right? Good question. Then I realized he asked me the same exact question every time, right? But he asked me the same exact question every time, not because he truly cared. It's because he read in some management book that that's the right thing to do, right? Because he knew nothing about anything that I explained to him.
You could have told the same story every time, and he would have
It didn't matter. Exactly. Now, that's different than if you really care, right? So then if I engage you and I say, Dolly, how you doing? How's your family?
Yeah.
How's your brother? Or, you know, etc. I mean, it's a relationship
much different.
that we're building. And obviously it gets a little harder as you have more people in your organization because there's lots of people.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think if you really care, that's where good leaders, I think, invest their time.
Yeah.
Good leaders invest their time in connecting with people, understanding what motivates them, helping them be successful, helping them build their careers, eliminating obstacles, and also making sure they're on the right path, because different people have different skills.
Fair.
And part of what you need to do is recognize what people are good at and help them along that path. So for me, that's where leaders really need to invest their time, but they truly also need to believe and embrace those principles. Otherwise, I also believe that people see through those very clearly.
Yeah.
And that's almost a worse situation if you're not really truly empathetic or interested.
Yeah, I agree.
And that makes a big difference.
So, on the topic of understanding your skills for the team, I think there's been a shift towards a movement where, I mean, there's TDPs, there's technical development rotations, programs where leadership programs and across all these companies where they're moving leaders around and getting this more robust, rounded leader.
Yeah.
There's a bigger focus on work-life balance, mental health, all these things. How do you think, as the next generation of leaders, we're able to well balance that? Because in the end, you're going to get a better rounded employee, happier, whatever.
Yeah.
But then there is this past, maybe older generation where maybe you just worked really hard. You're working because you're getting money. You know, you're working your way up, and that also works. Yeah. But I think in between that transition, there might be this efficiency maybe where it's like you have people wanting to hop around, and you're like, okay, you kind of have to prove yourself first, but you do want them to be happy and be able to rotate. Yeah. But then obviously keeping knowledge in a team is beneficial. I'm just curious about some thoughts around that. It's something that I've been evaluating lately.
I think it's another great question, right? So I guess I believe in a couple of principles, right? Is in this regard. You know, one is generationally there is a change. You know, and you know, so kind of what I believe is that people that are coming into the workforce today or that are younger in their careers, you know, have a different set of priorities than people did 20, 30 years ago, right? And that's true. And I think we have to be responsive to understand how the workforce culture changes. I also believe that there's a difference. So I think in an organization, in any, right, you have to have both depth and breadth, right? And so there's room for all of that. And what I mean, some people, right, want to be really deep technical experts. And I think we have to encourage that because we need that technical depth. You need product depth, so on and so forth. And that's very valuable. At the same time, you need to build breadth, you know, in the organization because leaders, particularly cross-functional leaders, cannot be one note, I call it, right? They need to be able to manage complexity, you know, if you will, across the business. So, you know, all of that said, I think there's a balance between those three items, which is how do people want to work today versus what are they interested in? And are they more interested in depth or breadth? And what do they aspire to, connecting it to what I talked about earlier, with the last piece, which is if you're interested, particularly in leadership positions, breadth's really important. Yeah. And so you have to connect all those dots. Okay. You know, and it's unfortunately it's going to be different for everybody because I don't think there's one formula that applies to everybody. So your situation may be different than mine, and it goes back to, you know, what are you willing to do or interested in doing? What sacrifices are you willing to make? You know, those kinds of things. But, you know, I think in general, that's kind of how I view it. But I do think, so I just want to wind back to the beginning here of your question, which is that leaders today need to recognize how the workforce is changing and how priorities for employees are changing, you know, in order to create, to have them be fulfilled, to appreciate what they're doing, to keep them engaged and interested, you know, and certainly to keep them and have them continue to grow within a particular company. Because also today, I believe people are more mobile than ever, right? So people will look for different opportunities. So I think the time, you know, historically, right, if you go back even before my generation, right, years ago, right, somebody can hope to, you know, their first job might have been the job they retired out of or the company, right? Let's say at least. That's much less prevalent today.
Oh, 100%. I remember when I first joined, my dad was like, hey, pick the one, and then you're just going to stay there forever. And I was like, what?
No, that's exactly right. Whereas today, I think, I don't even know what the statistics are anymore, but it used to be, you know, people changed 5 jobs in the first 10 years of their career or something like that. I mean, some big number. So that's changed, you know, and I think, you know, so I'm going to say this from a company perspective, you know. So from a company perspective, you want to keep talented people and keep them engaged and keep them motivated, right? That's the goals we should be working towards.
I mean, and it goes back to what you were saying. If you know your people, you know their skills. Not everyone can be broad and not everyone can be deep. So if you can figure out what works for everyone, what their talents, what they want.
And by the way, one last point on that is people work for people. So I know you said this a little earlier. Of course, people work for money. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, you want to get paid for what you do. But rewards are short term.
For sure.
You know, so what the biggest motivator, and I've seen this, you know, really is do you like what you're doing and do you like who you work for? If you don't have either of those, it's a big problem.
But that's, if you have both, I'm sure.
And you feel like you're fairly compensated, right? You know, kind of the third piece, and you're advancing and you're moving towards your career aspirations, then you've got the whole picture.
But honestly, you're right. I think those two, what you're doing, who you're working for, compensation is a third. There's a point where you're like, I'm secure as long as I'm not getting, you know, completely, you know, as long as it's fine, it's, you know, within, I have a decent career, you know, you have that money. People are fine. It's when the other two are going wonk, they're like, I'm staying for what? How, you need, you know, what money am I staying for? And that's when I think people tend to get more frustrated maybe with their salaries by like a few nominals, you know.
Right. I agree with that.
So do we have time for 2 more questions? All right. So 2 more questions. One, has there been a moment in your life that you think, whether it's a specific moment, a time in your life that maybe was pivotal in becoming the person you are today? Outlook-wise, mindset?
I think there were some pivotal moments in my life. One I explained already, which is when I was in high school and I decided that I was interested in engineering and I wanted to be a design engineer. So I'd say a pivotal moment in my life was deciding that I was going to pursue an engineering technical track. You know, and I really believed that's what I wanted, what I enjoyed, and I did, right? And I did, and I have. You know, I think that was pivotal for me. The second pivotal, though, may surprise you a little bit. You know, the second pivotal moment in my life is that, you know, there was a moment in time when I had to decide, did I want to be an engineer or did I want to be, or was I going to be an operations leader? And both kind of fit together because, you know, they're almost one and the same nowadays, right? Like there's a lot of overlap between them. But it was a big change in kind of my career, you know? So that's all true. Now, I want to tell you, though, the most pivotal moments in my life were neither of those. The most pivotal moments in my life were personal. Right? And so what I would tell you is when after, so I have 3 children. When my first son was born, I learned a lot, right? You know, as most of us do, right? It's different, right? You learn some new things, right, about yourself. When my second daughter was born, it changed my outlook on life, right? And it changed my outlook in life, not because of her, but, you know, because now your family is expanding. And what it changed for me was kind of this idea of, what am I doing and what am I prioritizing? Am I prioritizing my work life?
Yeah.
Am I prioritizing my personal life? And what's the right balance for me? And so I would say that was a meaningful moment in my life.
Had to start evaluating how you're spending your time and energy.
How you're spending your time and energy, what sacrifices you're willing to make. Of course, you know, what most people care about is how do they secure the future, you know, for not only themselves, but for their children. You know, your priorities kind of change because you're less worried about yourself now as you are for others. Fair. You know.
And by the third kid, did anything change?
No.
You're like, all right, we got it.
Most people will tell you that. At that point, you got it. You know, it's all good. But I mean, that's different for different people. I mean, there's many people that have different situations in their life, you know, that make different decisions and have different pivotal moments. Yeah. You know, those certainly.
It's just interesting to see, because I think different people's pivotal moments are different. It's always interesting to see what those things were. Yeah. And it always helps me when I'm going through the hard times, because I think if I look back, the most pivotal moments of my life and the ones with the most growth are the ones that were the most stressful and maybe in the moment were the most hard to get through. Yeah. And so when I'm kind of going through those moments, I'm like, I wonder what I'm going to get out of this on the other side.
Well, yeah. No, I agree. But I think one thing you'll find, you know, kind of on that point is that it seems whatever is important to you at that moment, you know, kind of when you, in 5 years from now, and you look on it, will you still consider that your most pivotal?
That's a very good point.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe the answer is yes. You know, maybe the answer is no.
It fades away,
Yeah, because, you know, obviously you've, at that point, maybe crossed other pivotal moments, right? That change what you're doing or what you're playing for. So anyway, I just think that it changes and it varies for people. And as you know, kind of as you move along your lifeline, right? Yeah. You know, things change considerably.
Yeah. And the more you experience things, I think in college, I had like no significant pivotal moments. Or maybe to your point now, I don't remember them, right? And then...
You might.
It's like, and then at a certain point, you're like going through something, and then you look back, and I think at when I had first started work, things would be going wrong, and they're like, Dali, why are you always smiling when things? I'm like, I had worse. And then you have another experience, and then it reminds you, and it almost like kind of sets you on the path again,
100%.
Where you're more grateful for.
Like I remember when I was in college, a pivotal moment for me was I going to pass Calc 3?
Like, this was really stressful at the time.
Exactly. That's long gone, right?
Like, in the moment it was needed. Now,
exactly.
Yeah, good point.
Not as much. No, but I mean, that always changes. You know, your first job, right? Mm-hmm. That's another pivotal moment, you know? I mean, so there's many, many things that affect you.
Yeah. So is there one last piece of advice you'd like to leave the audience with?
I think the last piece of advice I'd leave the audience with is you have to understand your aspirations, follow your dreams. There's no right or wrong path, but you have an opportunity to shape your future, and try not to over-plan it. Because I know lots of people give advice about plan every career step. Oh, yeah. I would just tell you that that's wrong. You know, I believe you have to take life kind of as it flows. And I think you got to understand and kind of set what's important to you and what your priorities are. And, you know, if your priorities are be promoted, or are your priorities, you know, expand your ability and impact. Yeah. You know, and I think both come together eventually into what you want them to be. So the best advice I think I could give people, or that I'd want people to walk away from, is understand what really matters to you. Understand what sacrifices you have to make. Don't overthink your career path. Mm-hmm. You know, do the best you can. Remember the principles of what's important, and opportunities will come your way. I promise you that.
Couldn't agree more. I'm sure there's a lot of people listening that are like, like let out a good deep breath, where it is, you know, and I'm sure you'll have much more peace going to bed at the end of the night with
That's
that,
right.
with that strategy as well, right?
Exactly.
Because there's gonna come a point where your promotions, you're set, your salary, you're set.
Yeah.
But you still have to live with yourself at the end of the day, right?
Correct.
You have to continuously do this for the rest of however long you want to work. And even when you retire, what are you doing with your life, and how are you, that legacy you're leaving?
If you're going to work 30 to 35 years or 40 years of your life, you better love what you're doing.
Yeah.
Is what I would say.
Oh, yeah. And it's like, I mean, you for certain, you don't know someone's background, but so you might need for your own security, right?
Yeah.
To chase that promotion, to chase those salaries for a certain point. But there's going to come a baseline when you're safe.
Correct.
And you feel that safety.
Correct. And that changes, your priorities change over time, and that's all fine.
Yeah.
That's all fine. It's natural.
And it's the moment, you can't avoid the moment where you're saying, what purpose am I putting out there? What am I living for and doing, and the output that I'm giving, the energy.
Exactly.
And the legacy that we talked about.
And make your time meaningful.
Yeah.
Because you're creating a legacy. That's 100% right. Yep.
Well, thank you so much.
You betcha. This has been a great time, Dolly.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
You betcha. Take care.
Thanks.